Okay, I'm going to get started with our next topic here, which is eliminating the pollution of ignorance. This is mastering the development of wisdom to fully transform the mind and attain enlightenment. Because now, having learned dependent origination, you understand how important cultivating wisdom is, right? So this is an actual fetter. And for every single person who gets to enlightenment, this is the last fetter to actually be eliminated, where the others, even though they're in a certain order, they can actually be eliminated in different orders. They don't all get eliminated in that same order. But this one is the last one for everyone, and I'll explain to you why as we get going. So first, hold on, let me switch over to visual aids here. So first, let's just talk about what ignorance is, but you guys are already starting to understand this to a certain degree. This is where the mind has this unknowing of true reality, the delusion, the confusion, the misunderstanding, the misperception of true reality. What true reality is the natural laws of existence. It's the way the world truly operates. But because of the ignorance or the unknowing of true reality, the mind doesn't understand how the world truly operates. There's these natural laws that are functioning and affecting us whether we're aware of it or not, but we don't see that true reality because of the ignorance, because of the misunderstanding. We'll think that somebody else is causing us to be angry or frustrated. Or someone might think the reason why something good or bad is happening to them is because of good luck or bad luck or destiny or fate or because of God. And it's this being who's deciding whether we get punished or rewarded or things like this. There's all kinds of delusions out there. So more and more, the mind is needing to arise wisdom of the natural laws of existence. Those are the teachings of the Buddha. That's what the Buddha is doing, is he's describing to you these natural laws. And then you learn them, you reflect on them to independently verify them, and you practice them. So the mind's ignorant or having this unknowing of true reality of things like the three universal truths, the Four Noble Truths, the Eightfold Path, the Five Precepts, the three wholesome or unwholesome roots, the natural law of karma, the cycle of rebirth, on and on and on and on. We could just go on and on, all the different teachings of the Buddha, the 10 fetters. The mind doesn't understand these pollutions in the mind, the 7 factors of enlightenment. We could just go on and on and on. Dependent origination, the mind doesn't know about that. So while a lot of people are translating this to ignorance, I tend to not use this word. I only use it because other people use it. So if you study other places, you can see where this plugs in. But I tend to use the unknowing of true reality because the word ignorance is kind of like a derogatory word. It's a degrading, demeaning word nowadays, the way people talk about it or use it. So a Buddha wouldn't refer to people in derogatory, degrading, and demeaning ways. So that's why the unknowing of true reality or confusion or misunderstanding or misperception is a much better way to talk about this. But if you ever happen to see anything else out there about the teachings of the Buddha, most people are using this word ignorance or delusion, and that way you'll know what we're talking about here. So this is what ignorance is, where the mind just doesn't understand what it doesn't understand. And that's why it stays stuck in this continuous cycle, right? All right. So then the symptoms of this ignorance is discontentedness, that as long as the mind is ignorant, it's going to experience discontentedness. That's dependent origination. At the top line, because of ignorance, there's going to be discontentedness. That's the output, the input and the output, right? And you guys are familiar with these conditioned feelings. And remember, these are conditioned feelings, the conditional happiness, not the unconditioned happiness, but the conditional happiness, that the mind can only be happy when these conditions are met. And that's because of the ignorance. Of course, it's craving, desire, attachment that we penetrate into the Four Noble Truths to explain to you what's causing that. But if it wasn't for the ignorance, the craving wouldn't exist. So if there's ignorance, there's going to be conditional feelings. Other symptoms, struggles and difficulties in relationships in life, inability to make wise decisions that lead to wholesome results or wholesome karma. So you're going to notice that in your relationship with your parents or your siblings or your life partner or your children or people around you, you will struggle because your mind doesn't know how to relate to these individuals in a warm, loving way all the time. You might even experience that you're being disrespectful or impolite or otherwise unkind. And then because of that, these people are going to function with you in that way as well. All the other symptoms that we talked about related to the fetters, those are all because of ignorance, right? So we talked about personal existence view, and we talked about all the symptoms that you experience there. Yes, it's because of personal existence view, but it's also because of ignorance. Because if it wasn't for ignorance, personal existence view wouldn't exist. All the symptoms of doubt, wrong behavior and observances, the central desire, the ill will, desire for form and formless, conceit and restlessness, all those symptoms are all being experienced because of ignorance. So this is the symptoms of ignorance, is that the mind is unenlightened, continuing to struggle and have difficulties in the world. It lacks wisdom of these natural laws. It continues to make unwise decisions, which are leading to these unwholesome results. The way you eliminate this, or the solutions, is to cultivate wisdom about the natural laws of existence. And then you're practicing the teachings to transform the mind through developing your life practice, fully eradicating the 10 fetters, 100%. So the cultivation of wisdom, it's not just an intellectual pursuit. There's a certain amount of intellectual learning that you need to do, but it's when you're actually practicing the teachings that the ignorance is fully eradicated. So for example, we might have known at different times in our life that it's unwise to drink alcohol or use drugs. We might have known that. That was the intellectual learning that we had done, but we still did it. We still drank alcohol. We still used drugs. That's because of our ignorance. It's not until you now integrate that wisdom or that intellectual learning into your life and you're now practicing it that the ignorance is eradicated. So it's not just intellectual learning. When we talk about wisdom, it's that the individual is making decisions through this wisdom, and now their verbal, their mental, and their bodily conduct is being informed by that wisdom. That somebody knows deeply it's unwise to ingest substances that cause heedlessness. It just creates all kinds of havoc in our life. We learn the wisdom that it's unwise to argue, that it just doesn't make any sense. If you stand there and argue, you're just going to get angry. The other person's going to get angry. You guys are going to be bitter and harsh and hostile. It's going to damage the relationship. You can know that intellectually, but your mind just won't do it because of its cravings, because of its sensual desire, because of its ill will. So once you're actually doing it and you're practicing it, that's where the ignorance is being transformed and eradicated from the mind. You can know that it's unwise to lie, but the mind still might do it because of its sensual desire, its cravings, wanting things to be a certain way. And if it tells the truth, it's not going to get what it wants. So these other fetters kind of overpower the mind in certain situations. And now because of the mind's ignorance, it still does those things. Okay, so it's when you're practicing these things that the mind is actually fully transformed. And you need to be able to practice and cultivate the wisdom to the point where none of those 10 fetters are subject to future arising. Some of these fetters can go dormant for a period of time. This is where you might have been in a relationship, having sex for a period of time, and then you get out of a relationship, and maybe you're single for a couple of years, and you're choosing not to have sexual relationship. There's still sensual desire in there because 3 years down the road, when you get a new relationship, you start having sex again. So there's this dormant period that can happen with these fetters. You can notice even your conceit can go dormant for a period of time where you're not arrogant and prideful for a couple of weeks or a couple of months, but then all of a sudden it rises back up. So this is where you need to be very attentive to the mind with your mindfulness, understanding these fetters that you need to eradicate them to the point where they're no longer subject to future arising. The Eightfold Path is what's going to allow you to completely eradicate the ignorance. That's the core central teaching that everything else is plugging into, that you need to arise wisdom of this core central teaching. The ignorance is eliminated through a well-developed practice, not just the intellectual learning, but through learning, reflecting, to independently verify, and then practice. That's how you eradicate the ignorance. So the way that you'll know that the ignorance is completely eliminated is the mind will actually be enlightened at that point. And these are the things that we've talked about with enlightenment, and I've got some more as well, that the mind's going to be peaceful, calm, serene, and content with joy permanently. This is where you'll get 1 year, 2 years, 3 years. There's no discontent, and it's not even the slightest ickiness in the mind. Because sometimes you can just have, you just feel a little bit off today. You're not angry, you're not frustrated, you just feel a little bit off. You won't even have have that by the time your mind's enlightened. You just always feel peaceful and joyful. The mind's serene all the time. You'll notice that you have a high degree of focus, concentration, memory, and clarity of mind. Things where it was very hard and very challenging for you to retain certain understanding or certain wisdom, you'll have refined your mind because you're now retaining all these teachings of the Buddha and you're practicing them regularly. So you'll have a high degree of focus and you'll find it very easy to focus and have clarity of mind and memory. None of these feelings will be experienced, none of these and others. Even the slightest displeasure is eliminated. You'll notice that you're polite, kind, friendly, and respectful towards all beings, that there's no harm that you're causing to others, and therefore harm isn't coming back to you. You'll notice that your personal and professional relationships will be conducted with ease. So you guys have heard me share these before, but sometimes there's people tuning in that haven't learned this with me, so that's why I make sure I be very thorough in the way that I'm explaining this. So now here's some things that we haven't necessarily talked about in relationship to enlightenment. That the mind is going to be in a good mood. You'll never experience a bad mood anymore when ignorance is completely eradicated, because all the causes and conditions that are producing the bad mood have been eliminated. Namely, that central desire, but all the others as well. Because when you have central desire in your mind, when you're getting what you want, you'll be in a good mood. But when you're not getting what you want, you'll be in a bad mood, right? But by the time you eradicate all these pollutions, you're just always in a good mood all the time. Every day is going to be a good day. There's never going to be a bad day any longer. Where now, if the mind's getting what it wants, that's a good day. If the mind's not getting what it wants, oh, that's a bad day. It's a horrible day because I didn't get what I wanted. But you don't have that anymore. The mind's been fully transformed. So every day is a good day. You'll notice that the body and the mind is no longer tired or exhausted. The mind does experience sleepiness, but it's not tired or exhausted because you're practicing the middle way. When you're out there chasing down your cravings and you're carrying this burden, when you don't get what you want, it's exhausting. Or when you have that conceit and you're in a group of people and you're constantly trying to figure out this pecking order of who you're above and who you're below, this is exhausting for you. When you're carrying around personal existence view, you're kind of on guard and waiting for somebody to say something that's degrading or disparaging. When you have fear that your mind has certain cravings and there's fear that's coming up in your mind, it's exhausting to experience these discontent feelings. So by the time you eliminate all these pollutions, you're not going to notice any tiredness or exhaustion, that the mind is uplifted and it's just consistently sustaining its energy throughout your day. It'll be impossible for the mind to be shaken up. The mind's going to be stable, steady, and unshakable permanently. It doesn't matter what's happening. Your mom could die and you wouldn't be grieving about that. Not because you don't love her. You love your mom, but you're just not attached to her. You just know that of course she died because she was born. She had to die. And you're not holding on to her. You're not attached to her. So therefore, you're not going to be shaken up when she dies. You can maintain your appreciation and your gratitude for having her in your life and the things that she's done for you and the things that times that you've spent together, even if she wasn't the perfect mom, because there isn't a perfect mom out there. Everybody is doing whatever they're doing. Their parents are never going to meet their children's expectations 100% of the time. So if you can at least get to the point where you can have gratitude and appreciation for mom and knowing that she's doing things her way based on whatever wisdom she has, she's not going to be able to meet your expectations, then you can just maintain your love, which is a genuine interest in seeing her be well. Right? And you may or may not even spend time with your mother at different times, right? You might have disagreements with mom and maybe you guys have decided to not spend so much time with each other anymore. But you can at least get to the point where you have a genuine interest in seeing her be well, but realizing that her being well is based on her decisions, not your decisions, right? So you will get to a point where you won't be shaken up by anything. Even if your parents were murdered or their house burned down or any of these big significant things, you would just understand it's the natural law of karma. It's cause and effect. There were certain decisions that led to this. You had no way of stopping that from occurring. And you're not attached to these things. It's just all impermanence. And you're not going to form your inner feelings based on these external things. But you'll care and you might help people in certain situations where you can help, and you'll have that care, but you won't be forming your feelings based on these things. You'll notice that you're no longer struggle in life, that you'll be living this ideal life, that in the unenlightened state with a lack of wisdom, when there's ignorance in the mind, you'll struggle. You'll have difficulties. This is part of what one experiences when there's ignorance in the mind, because you're making unwise decisions and you're constantly stumbling over your feet. And sometimes, in some days, it seems like nothing can go right because the mind is just lacking wisdom. And because of its cravings, it can only be happy when things go your way. So by the time you get to enlightenment, you understand that all these things that are happening, it's just impermanence. That's all it is. And you don't crave it to be one way or the other. It's just the way it is. And now you just walk through life making wise decisions that lead to more and more wholesome outcomes. Okay, any questions on this? Anything on ignorance? We've already talked about this through dependent origination, right? So I'm not sure that you guys will have very many questions. Let me see. We have anything online? Steve's got a question? Okay.
Thank you, David. So my question is sort of along the lines that we're coming from an unenlightened state. Mm-hmm. And then for whatever reason we start to learn these teachings, and it sort of wakes up the mind. And as you say, the distinction between intellectually understanding and practicing it. Is there a step there of making a decision that I'm going, like, yes, I can see that this is the path to enlightenment, but I need to make a decision to implement it, right? Mm. Yeah, and then if I say not yet, or not all of it, or not later, does that mean I don't truly understand ignorance, or it's just my stage of development?
You might understand what ignorance is, but you haven't eradicated it yet, right? So you can walk down the beach and realize that it's unwise to kick up sand because it's just going to blow back in your face. And you can understand that. You have the intellectual understanding of it. But maybe as a young child, you still walk down the beach and kick up sand and it just keeps blowing back in your face. But eventually you get to the point where it's like, I don't like it when sand keeps blowing back in my face. I need to figure out what I'm doing that's causing this so I can make different decisions. And now when I start making different decisions, I get different results, which is I can walk down the beach without any sand blowing back in my face. And now intellectually understanding that, reflecting on it and seeing it's the truth, now you practice it and you see the results that I can walk down the street walk down the beach without any sand blowing up in my face, and I like this much better. And this is what you're doing with each individual aspect of your life, is you realize, using right speech for example, that we learn intellectually it's unwise to lie. And then we reflect on it and we're like, yeah, whenever I lie, all these unwholesome things are happening. Okay, well, let me practice this now of not lying. My mind's more calm. My relationships are going better. I like this better. I'm never going to go back to this lying ever again. I won't ever do that because I've seen the truth. I've now got wisdom and I'm fully practicing that particular aspect of the practice, and that part of the ignorance has been eliminated. And then you just go through each individual aspect of the Buddhist teachings, independently learning it, verifying it, and practicing it. And your life is just becoming better and better and better and better. And you're like, I enjoy walking down the beach without sand blowing back in my face. I like this life where everything is peaceful and joyful and I'm not experiencing any unwholesome results. This feels great. And I'm going to now, with that wisdom that you've cultivated all the way through, you're just going to keep making decisions in that way. It's like I talk about when you're upgrading your operating system, like the computer analogy, that the mind in the unenlightened state, it's this old archaic operating system, and it's really cumbersome to work with it. And when you first start upgrading this operating system to this new operating system, it's hard. It's a struggle because they've moved the icons around and you don't know where the settings are. But slowly but surely you figure out how to operate on this new operating system, and now it's effortless. It's like, wow, this is so much better. And now you'll just always operate through that wisdom. So yeah, the mind just, if it understands something is unwise, but it's just not practicing it, It's just because the mind hasn't developed its practice to that point yet. But slowly but surely, and this is why you can see it's gradual training, gradual practice, and gradual progress. You can't just snap your fingers. So the idea of the Buddha sitting under a tree, meditating and instantly getting to enlightenment, you can see through dependent origination and ignorance that it just doesn't work. That's not the way that it worked. And you can see in the original words of the Buddha that he doesn't say it was instantaneous. So it's going to take you some time to gradually build up this wisdom and gradually eradicate the ignorance. And that's where your life's becoming more and more peaceful and more joyful. So you see the benefits, and it's like leading you towards more and more improvement. Yep. You're welcome. Question?
I just wanted to ask about kind of making more wise decisions, especially when you're discontented. Mm-hmm. So like yesterday when I went through my discontentedness, after I was like, I'd really like to have my favorite meal, but that came out of an attachment, obviously. It's not hurting anyone, but I understand that it's not conducive to my growth. So what would have been a more wise decision after that experience to kind of not indulge in those things?
So the way I describe this is that in order to get to enlightenment, you're going to have to walk through the fire in order to appreciate the fresh air on the other side. So during those 3 hours where you were experiencing those discontent feelings, you were in the fire. And then you were getting to the other side and you were getting some fresh air and you're like, wow, this feels really good. The mind's a little bit more uplifted and joyful. But then there were some cravings that kicked in, and you'll have to decide for yourself, because on your way to enlightenment, as you're getting rid of certain cravings, you're going to see other cravings pop up. And this is where I was talking about the trash heap, that as you're clearing off the trash heap, you drop down and see more trash, and there's going to be more cravings. And in that situation, you'll need to decide, like, what am I interested in doing here? Because in some cases, it can make sense to just give the mind a little bit about what it wants. Right? Because if you just shed a whole bunch of attachments and now there's this other craving that's coming up, you could be like, I see you there craving. I'm not going to let you have that either. But you could work yourself into a point where, wow, you're just like, shedding things so quick, your mind's like spinning and now you have trouble sleeping. So in some situations, if you know you've shed a few things and you see this other craving popping up, you might say, yep, I see you craving and I'm going to need to get rid of you too. But right now, I'm just going to have that favorite meal. And that's what I need. And right now, I understand this is craving and I understand I need to get rid of this craving, but now's not the time to do that. You got to kind of pick and choose, because if you just went through a whole bunch of shedding, you might not be ready to shed that particular craving right now. And sometimes you can actually use one craving to help you get away from another one. I did this with my son. There was a time where he was very attached to his mom and sleeping with his mom, and his mom was attached to him too. And I said to him, I said, hey, we have that extra room. And, when we bought the house, I bought it with the understanding that that was your room. You've got this extra room. And he's like, oh, no, I'm not interested in sleeping there. I'm going to sleep with mom. And I was like, okay, you do whatever you would like to do. We have that extra TV too. And I was thinking that if you were going to start staying in this room, I was going to put that extra TV in that room. And at that time, he was attached to TV too. And he was like, TV? I get to watch my own TV. I don't have to watch what you guys are watching. I can watch my own stuff. I'm like, yeah, it's up to you. You're going to sleep with mom, so I'm not going to put it in there. But if you would like that room for yourself, I'll go ahead and put that TV in there. And he was like, all right, I'll start sleeping in there. I was like, well, it's up to you. I'll put it in there for you. So then I put it in there and he started slowly sleeping in the room. And he did that for about 3 months. And it was really hard for him to fall asleep. Sometimes we had to go in there and sit down with him and help him. But then after a while, he slept in there for about 3 months by himself. But then he went back to his mom's room because that craving hadn't been extinguished yet. And then, but slowly but surely, he started sleeping in his own room on his own. These were all his own choices. But sometimes you can use one craving to kind of lead the mind in the direction away from a stronger craving and a more addictive craving, a more impactful craving that's affecting your life more, you can use this lighter craving to kind of lead your mind towards that. Because yeah, like you say, you're not harming anybody by choosing to eat that favorite meal. It's just maintaining that craving within your own mind. So you might need that every once in a while. It's also like that analogy you might have heard me share, like a dam. When the pressure of the dam is rising up, they open up the dam, kind of release the pressure. Sometimes that's what you need to do, is just give it that little bit of craving. If it was something really destructive, and I know you don't do these things like cocaine or crystal meth, no, you're not interested in doing that. But something like a favorite meal, sometimes you might just need that. But just keep a awareness that, hey, this is a craving. I know it's a craving and I'm going to get to it, but right now isn't the time. Mm-hmm. All right, so let's see. We don't have any other questions anywhere. So as you guys saw, we usually take a lunch here. Normally we're doing excursions, but today we kind of take a lunch, and oftentimes students are interested in going out and taking a group lunch, and that's why we take a little bit more time. We don't have to do a group lunch if you guys aren't interested, but the schedule has us coming back at 2:00, which gives us a nice 2 hours. If you guys would like to go out and go somewhere and have a group lunch, Roxanne says yes, she'd like to have a group lunch. Dolce, Claire, okay, Leela. All right, if you guys would like to go out and have a group lunch, we'll do that. For those of you guys online, we're going to start again at 2:00. And what I'm going to do when we come back is we're going to do the meditation. And some of you guys would like to do the one about sexual cravings. You can do that to eliminate those. Others, I'll just do breathing mindfulness meditation. Then we're going to talk about how to determine if you've attained enlightenment. Then we're going to talk about continued support. And then I'm just going to open up to any and all questions that you guys have related to anything related to the teachings of the Buddha, just a random question answer period. So thank you guys for all your questions, and let's go have some fun and have a nice group lunch, okay? All right, thank you.